Hi, I'm Emily Koschnick. I'm the Executive Director of GIPC, the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee. And again, thank you for attending this morning. I want to thank Faegre Drinker for serving as our title sponsor again for this event. Charles Whistler was a partner at what was then Baker and Daniels for many years, and we are grateful to continue to honor his memory and service with their significant sponsorship of this event. Thank you. And I also have the pleasure of recognizing some important members of our community that we have in the audience this morning. Recognition for the members of the City County Council who are in attendance. Councilors Lakeisha Jackson, she's waving up. Go ahead and stand up. Council Michael Paul Hart, Brian Mowry, Keith Potts, and Krista Parlino. So thank you. Also, if I could have all former Whistler Award winners stand and be recognized. It's always nice to bring you all back together, and it's so nice to be in person, so thank you all for coming. And then last but certainly not least, I would love for the Mayor's Cabinet to stand so we may thank them for the service to their service to our city. I'd also like to recognize our Mayor Joe Hogsett, whom we will hear from later.
I would also like to thank Ivy Tech President Sue Ellspermann and the Indianapolis Chancellor Lorenzo Esters for their hospitality today. And finally, I would like to recognize Phil Whistler, the son of Charles Whistler, the granddaughter Anne, and grandson Charles, and thank them for coming today. I'd like to give a little history about GIPC and the Whistler Award for anyone who might be new to this annual tradition. The Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee, or GIPC as we like to say it, was founded in 1965 and exists to provide a nonpartisan forum in which leaders of the public and private sectors of Indianapolis can work together to study, discuss, and address issues, concerns, and areas of opportunity which affect the progress of the city. The Whistler Award is the mayor's highest honor for civic leadership and volunteerism and is named after Charles L. Whistler, whose contributions to Indianapolis included his support of and involvement in the creation of Unigov, the City Center on Monument Circle, and the modernization of White River State Park. This is our 37th year joining the Mayor of Indianapolis in awarding the Whistler Award, which recognizes an individual who has brought together the public and private sectors for civic improvement in Indy in the tradition of Whistler himself. Each year, we ask members of the community to nominate individuals who reflect this leadership. And we couldn't be more excited about this year's winner, David Johnson, who exemplifies the passion and skill that Whistler displayed, going above and beyond what is expected of him to work for the overall improvement of the community. I would like to now introduce Reverend Christopher Henry from the Second Presbyterian Church so that he could deliver our invocation.
Good morning. It's a gift for me to be with you all this morning as we honor one who has committed his life to what matters most, to the enduring values of the faith he professes, to lifting others up, leading by example, displaying a profound generosity of spirit and a depth of soul. It's truly a privilege to be able to say that I am David Johnson and Ann Noble's pastor, though I must say it also evokes a certain humility to stand regularly in the pulpit before a couple whose lives demonstrate the message I aim to deliver. Not to mention David's own background as the son of an incredibly gifted preacher and Presbyterian pastor. David has received from Providence and parents the very best of what our Reformed tradition offers, a brilliant mind joined to a compassionate heart. And I'm grateful, David, for your witness of faithfulness, grace, and determination to serve the common good with those gifts that you have been given. I'm inspired and challenged to deeper dedication by the privilege of being your pastor. Thank you. Let us pray. In your presence and before your providence, we gather, O God, people from different backgrounds, passions, and perspectives, united in a spirit of gratitude, drawn together by a common commitment. With boldness and humility, we confess that too often our divisions outpace our common humanity, that our best intentions are left to languish, that our cynicism chips away at the hope we hold for the future. And so we ask this morning that you would renew weary souls through testimony to what is good and pleasing and excellent and honorable. We ask that you would inspire us so that we would aspire to live every day in ways that lift others up, especially the left behind, the down and out. And so use this time of celebration and recognition to challenge each of us to dream a little bigger, to dig a little deeper, to work a little harder, to love a little wider. Oh God, as your people entrusted with the care of others, we refuse to be limited by what has been, trusting that you lead us into what will be. Oh God, as your people, we refuse to be captive to despair or held back by small-minded vision. Today we give thanks for those who, like David Johnson and Ann Nobles, lead with generous and compassionate hearts. For all who carry that vision into action so that barriers may come down and all people may have the opportunity to thrive. We believe, oh God, that you call us to this work and that you call us to it together. And so we pray that your Spirit would gather us in, unite us in heart and mind, and then send us out with hearts on fire and minds made wiser. Give us the courage to live in ways that transcend division and reach toward your gracious will for all. Amen.
GIPC and Mayor Hogsett are very excited to present the 2022 Charles L. Whistler Award. But before we hear from our mayor and from David, each year we have shared a wonderful video on our recipient. I'd like for you to now enjoy this year's video.
When I heard that David Johnson was the Whistler Award winner, I was thrilled because I know of the long personal association and relationship David has had with the Whistler family. Phil Whistler, Chuck's son, has been one of David's best friends forever. He's known Chuck personally. My husband also worked for Chuck Whistler when it was Baker and Daniels, so I knew Chuck, my husband knew Chuck, David did. And what a wonderful person and role model I think he's been for David. And I know David, because of that personal relationship, this award has a very special personal meaning to him.
David's a preacher's kid. Many people don't know that also. But that was part of his public service. He was a practicing attorney, and I understand was a pretty good attorney at Baker and Daniels. But David was also involved in public service. Sort of his mission, his ministry was public service.
You know, I've seen David, you know, I've seen his resume, and I'm just kind of, you know, so impressed by it, right? I mean, here's somebody that went to Harvard Law and went to Oxford, so he's an extraordinarily well-educated person, who, by the way, doesn't necessarily show you that, right? It's not like, hey, by the way, I happen to have this degree. He's somebody that, just because of his natural, modest approach to leadership and connecting with people, you recognize the education and the talent that he has.
As a visionary, David has enough experience in different sectors of the community to kind of understand not only how they fit together, but what kind of things would make the most difference in benefiting the citizens of the state. He's able to think about and understand problems that emerge from the public sector, from the private sector, to connect the two. It's remarkable, actually. He's probably the best I've ever seen.
I think when we talk about leadership, and sometimes particularly community-oriented leaderships, and the general perception is this very outspoken, very charismatic leader. Of course, David is that way, but in his own very thoughtful and almost a quiet approach.
One of the things that I really appreciate about David is he's involved in so much, and I never know whether it's because of his role as the CEO of CICP or if it's because of his leadership in the community. But all those things come together, and so David is just someone who always has a pulse on what's happening in the business community, in the civic community, in the philanthropic community, and in the public sector.
I just think of him as this amazing combination of maybe great one-to-one and personally, but always thinking about these bigger ideas, and so he plants so many wonderful seeds with me, and I just love talking to him. I always feel like I come away a better person after talking with him.
The NCAA had committed to move to Indianapolis in, I think, 96 or 97. But then it gets to the point, you know, like dog chasing a car. Uh-oh, now we've caught it. What do we do? So I became executive director at the White River State Park, working with David. We were going back and forth to Overland Park, Kansas to get ready. So David was sort of, if not the glue, he was sort of weaving this project together.
David Johnson was a key volunteer at BioCrossroads. And when you're a lawyer and you're getting paid by the hour, when you take time off for some of these very significant opportunities that David led, I mean, this is a real contribution to the community. So I think one of the key areas for the eventual success of BioCrossroads was the fact that David was an informal advisor to Governor O'Bannon. And because of that trust level and the experience they had, we were able to unlock some of the pension fund investments in our first life sciences venture fund.
So he's put together years and years of thinking about how to improve the state, which is his general proposition, like how do I make the place that I live and love better? And he's put together all these ideas from all these different sectors and begin to create a vision of the state where everybody benefits. And I think that's why CICP has become such an amazing organization.
I always think David has a servant's heart, so through CICP he's actually initiated a lot of studies to think about how do we make this a better community, and whether that's engaging the Brookings organization to think about what living wages are, his service on the Urban League board, where he's really thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, about how do we bring up our entire community. He also sits on the 16 Tech Community Board, which is really not about 16 Tech, it's about the neighborhood around that and how do they share in the improvements that are being brought about by 16 Tech.
One of the things that I really appreciate about David is oftentimes he's working on long-term projects for our community, and his work with 16 Tech is certainly an example of that. So while 16 Tech has many who have contributed to the vision over time, including multiple mayoral administrations. It's really David's steady leadership, and it's his recognition in about 2015 that without an organization that was devoted to oversight of the Innovation District, it wouldn't happen.
16 Tech, there's a great example of a vision that David had. And we're part of that now. We have some space down there. But the idea, again, of having this space right there in the center of the city that would bring together people from different sectors to support technology, the sciences, innovation, that's a visionary move. And so he was very helpful to us in terms of inviting us in, explaining how that might work, and us wanting to be at the table. It was a strong vision and something that many cities have, and he brought those people together.
Oftentimes the type of work from a community building standpoint, it's long term, it's in the trenches, it's not, the near term results is not visible. So how do you have enough conviction, but also not only or for yourself and your team, but the stakeholders that you're working with to make sure we follow through, and that's what I've seen him doing, particularly through the BioCrossroads strategy, because they're very capital intensive, but they were able to put up programming and visionary strategic initiatives like the 16 Tech, like the IBRI, that would generate meaningful impact for decades to come.
You know, I think one thing that people don't know about David is that he's written a book, and his father died kind of suddenly. His father was a Presbyterian minister. And so when David left to go to college, he and his father had a lot of correspondence about religion and faith. And after David's dad passed away, he compiled those in a book, which is, you know, pretty amazing. He's got kind of that aspect to him as well.
It is now my privilege and honor to introduce Mayor Hogsett, who will say a few words about David Johnson, our 2022 winner, and to present the award.
Well, thank you, Heather, and good morning. It's great to have so many people committed to the progress of our great metropolitan area together, and obviously such a deserving recipient of this year's Charles Whistler Award. I don't think that anyone needs an argument, as the video has just shown, for why David is so richly deserving of this award. But if I were to make such an argument, my primary article of evidence did not come through in the video. And I want to take just a moment to underscore it. My primary article of evidence would be our city's resilience during these last 3 years. Indianapolis weathered the pandemic better than many of our peers. And a lot of that came down to initiatives and planning that were years in the making, and most instituted by David Johnson. For starters, and most obviously, and many of you participated, there were the regular meetings of CICP throughout the entirety of the pandemic. There, at least once a month, and sometimes once a week. Top leaders among public and private sectors throughout Indiana came together to get on the same page. It was there that we heard from our state and local public health leaders, and experts. Not every community did this, but David's network is so broad, his understanding of the value of partnership so acute, that he recognized a regular discussion would help an enormously challenging time make more sense. Simply put. Secondly, David's championing of life sciences has helped lead to some of the most significant developments in recent city history, which were outlined in the video. Of course, I'm talking about 16 Tech, which David helped to spearhead. But I'm also talking about the new Elanco headquarters, the Novartis project at the site of the Purdue Research Park, and most of all, our city's welcome distinction as a new Midwestern hub for the industry. Third and finally, Indianapolis marshaled a heroic effort to pull off the 2021 NCAA men's college basketball tournament. It was a sorely needed moment of local pride. And indeed, it was a shot in the arm for our downtown. This too, we can tie to David's efforts years ago, bringing the NCAA headquarters to Indianapolis. And with recent announcements of even more women's and men's March Madness coming to our city, the wisdom of that association cannot be disputed. David Johnson, once again. It is for these reasons and many more that we recognize David Johnson as the recipient of the Charles Whistler Award for 2022. So I would ask that David come to the stage along with GIPC Chair Heather Wilson and Executive Director Emily Koschnick for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm keeping a close eye on the time here today. Yvonne Shaheen reminded me coming in this morning that speeches of any more than 20 minutes would not be welcome. This will be a whole lot less than that, but I am really grateful to all of you for being here today. Thank you, Mayor, for that wonderful introduction. This is just a real, it's hard to follow that video. That's just really incredible. You know, they don't show you those before you come, so it's a pretty cool thing to see. And Reverend Henry, thank you, Chris, for being here today and your wonderful inspirational words. There's just no one I would rather have give the invitation to be here, especially meeting me again, a long line of Presbyterian pastors. My dad was indeed a Presbyterian pastor for nearly 50 years, and he had a lot of good advice, and I try to follow as much as I can. Late in his career, he gave me one particular one from his own experience. He said, never pray for or praise any list of individual opponents, because as sure as you do that, you're going to leave somebody out. And I do want to be faithful to that advice here today, which is especially hard, because I know so many of you. I'm so grateful, privileged of working with you for so long, and now you're being here this pretty early hour for this really wonderful occasion. That said, and caution duly noted, I do want to single out a few people that I really must thanks. First, of course, and again, Mayor Hogsett, I really appreciate, Mayor, your kind comments. You and I have known each other for, I would say, nearly 40 years. It's a long time. And I have always enjoyed our relationship and our time together in so many different ways. And your energy and your enthusiasm and passion for your work and for the city is just inspirational to all of us. I must tell you that many of the things that you just gave me credit for were very much team efforts, and in many cases there are many people here in this room who have a lot more to do with them than I greatly appreciate your kind words this morning. Our members of the City County Council here today, thank you so much for being here. It's been wonderful to work with you all, particularly in this last few years as we developed 16 Tech. I want to thank members of the Whistler family, Bill and Charles, who are here. Bill is indeed my longest and best friend, longest standing and best friend. It is just wonderful to be here, family today, and to have a part of this great legacy. I want to thank Heather Wilson and the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee for all you do to make Indianapolis the best possible place to live and to work, just to be. Your work has never been more important than it is today, as people and companies and cities too, as the mayor just suggested, all seek to come back to the new normal, so that hopefully, finally, behind us. Fingers crossed on that. Enormous thanks to those of you, and I know there are many of you here today, who nominated me for this award. Again, sort of like the video, you don't exactly find out who else behind that. One person I know for sure behind that is Emily Kruger. And I was our CEO at 16 Tech, hosting a table for 16 Tech. Thank you, Emily, and thanks to all of you who nominated me for this amazing award here today. And I'm so grateful for the comments from all of you in that video we just saw, and I want to talk to some of you more about some of those comments a little later. They were pretty awesome. And finally, to my wife, Ann, who I'm very glad has already been noted here and celebrated this morning, as she absolutely should be. It is Ann who had the great good sense to see, long before I did, that Indianapolis was really where we should come as newlyweds, to have our family, our career, and our lives in a community that we could certainly have come above. Ann has, in her own right, made enormous contributions to the progress of this community and the city and state, and many of the institutions that serve us every day. Ann, I love you. So as I was mentioning to Phil just a moment ago, there is no award that is more significant and could mean more to me than the Charles Whistler Award. And Shane put her finger on the reason for that. This award's personal. It's really personal. I had the privilege of knowing Chuck Whistler starting my freshman year here at Carter High School. And where Chuck's son, Phil, and I were fast in the process of becoming best friends for a lifetime. Especially once I could drive a car and therefore stay out later. I spent many evenings, likely the term as I inflicted myself, on the Whistler household. There are others of us who did that too, but it's a fun place to be. Chuck was usually there, and usually working, no matter what the hour was of the week. Sometimes he'd have the TV on in the background, but he was always totally absorbed in what he was doing. And it's fun to watch in many ways. And as I talked with him, I started to learn more about what lawyers like Chuck Whistler did. And since I didn't know many lawyers, I assumed that that was what most lawyers were like did. And of course, such an assumption was really naive, because most lawyers didn't have a tenth of the brain power of Charles Whistler. And almost none of them had the intense commitment to community and service Chuck brought to work with him every single day, brought him home as well. I heard a lot about legal battles those evenings, but I also heard about the beginnings of Unigov, as Chuck Whistler was making that a legal reality. heard about the Indiana Theater, about to be torn down, until he worked really hard to get an early federal grant to allow it to be saved for a much better day and ultimately become the IoT. That was really the first big project in what became the revitalization of Indianapolis downtown. And I learned about Lockfield Gardens on Indiana Avenue, and what that 60s and 70s term of urban renewal could actually mean when it was done at scale and at its finest. Chuck Whistler loved his family, his life, his work, and his community. I'd never really known much about lawyers before, again, as we heard this morning, because I do come from a family of Presbyterian pastors, where vocation has always had a very different meaning. Or does it? What I saw in Chuck Whistler, especially in those late evenings, someone who also viewed service to clients and community as a seamless vocation, genuine calling. Someone who did not erect any barriers or boundaries between professional work and community service, or to all that service can be. Someone who lived with the challenge of not trying to be important, but just seeking to be useful at the grandest possible scale. Chuck Whistler had everything to do with my decision to become a lawyer. And ultimately, he had a lot to do with my coming to understand that my wife Ann was indeed right, as of course she so often is, that we really should come here and pursue our careers in the future. And for me, that pretty naturally meant going to the law firm that Chuck Whistler had helped build so much, Baker & Daniels. Today, of course, that firm goes by the name of Baker & Drinker, sponsor of this awards event, and as the sponsor, I obviously should be singling Bakery out for special thanks too, but I think I want to do something a little bit. Because there was one additional contribution Chuck Whistler made to this community. This is one that may be harder for some to see, unless you were like me, a lawyer at Baker & Daniels, to see it. When Chuck Whistler was a senior partner at Baker & Daniels, that firm, like most law firms, didn't really have much of a governance or management structure. It was growing larger, but it also remained a classic, simple partnership. But still, there were a few partners, starting very definitely with Chuck, who were the real firsts among equals. Those 3 or 4 leaders were responsible for virtually all the business and the major clients of the firm. Pretty much everybody knew it. Pretty much everybody, associates and partners, really worked with them. Inevitably, those partners who controlled the business also set the tone, controlled the culture. Chuck Whistler, along with other senior lawyers of his day, like Tom Laughlin and Steve Carey and J.B. King, determined that Baker & Daniels should take a very long view when it came to this community. They were pretty insistent about it. They believed that as many young lawyers as possible to try to become civically useful at some point, to get involved in the community that they would be working in and serving, presumably at that time, for the rest of their careers. It wasn't only about billable hours and getting clients. It was about becoming a citizen. It was contributing in some way to the betterment of the place and where the firm had always been, where its clients would always be. When you look at the list of those honored to receive this award in past years, you'll find that I am now the 6th Whistler Award recipient, extensive Baker Daniels. And with no slight intended to any of the other truly great law firms who've also had Whistler Award winners in the ranks of many here, I simply want to observe that the ability of succeeding generations of Baker & Daniels attorneys, lawyers like Ted Bohm, and then David Frick, John Neighbors, Dave Shane, Dan Evans, Charlie Richardson. Lawyers a little bit later, like Clay Robbins, Tom Fraley, Ben Blanton, Murray Clark, William Kennedy, Jack Swarbrick, Jeanette Hill, Fred Blatz, Kathy Osborne, and many others. Their capacity and their commitment to serve this community in the multiple wonderful ways that so many that they all have done and that so many still do. That's no accident. That comes from being part of an intentional culture. And it was, for me, very much Chuck Whistler's culture and legacy. And it was a culture and a legacy first to the law firm, ultimately to this community. I was such an enormous beneficiary of that legacy. All I was able to do, everything you saw in that video, extent that I was responsible for those things, I was able to do that because I was working in a firm that allowed me, gave me first the basic skills, and then allowed me the time, the opportunity, and the encouragement. All the service opportunities I've had, including working with Mayor Peterson in 2001, on the 2020 Regional Center Plan, that first envisioned 16 Tech. Earlier, working with Bill Shrewsbury to get the NCAA actually moved here again. There were a lot of people. And then later going on to help found by Crossroads, working very closely with Ann Shane in that effort. All that was possible for me too, particularly as a community volunteer, because I worked at a law firm that actually let me do that, trained me to do it, and encouraged me to do it. Chuck, that's my cue. Chuck, and you're going to be happy with that. Chuck Whistler not only helped me figure out what I wanted to be, he also helped me know where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do when I got here. And he left a workplace for all of that could actually happen. And so for me, it's such an intensely particular and personal, let me end right again. And I'm truly grateful to be here with all of you.
We'd like to take a moment now to recognize our title and legacy level sponsors. Our title sponsor today is obviously Faegre Drinker. Our legacy sponsors are Eli Lilly and CICP with 16 Tech.
Our visionary level sponsors, IU Health, eBank, Citizens Energy Group, and the Shaheen Foundation. Thank you all.
The progress level sponsors, we'd like to recognize Cummins, Ross Brown Todd, Old National Bank, and Ivy Tech.
And for everyone who purchased a table, thank you very much. Butler University, IUPUI, Pacers Sports and Entertainment, Airport Authority, McQueen Laboratory Supply, Barnes & Thornburg, Shrewsbury & Associates, and the National Bank of Indianapolis. Thank you all for helping support this annual tradition.
And finally, I also want to thank my selection committee this year. We really appreciate you coming. We look forward to seeing you at next year's breakfast, and happy holidays.